Hey everyone, hope that you all had a great week this week. Got to have my big 7-year-old Maverick up with me this week. Did you have a good week?
Yeah.
Yeah? Let's not make too much noise with my desk. Where'd we go last night?
The Lincoln Memorial.
You like going there? Is he your favorite president?
Yes.
Is that where you got your hat?
Yes.
Who's your second favorite president?
Donald Trump.
Okay, that's acceptable. Very good.
Yes. And then George Washington.
Okay, very good. We'll take it. Well, I had a great week with you. You can go. All right, as I said, hope you all had a great week this week. I always love having my boys up with me and my little girl up with me. The 3-month-old hasn't quite come up with me yet, but it'll happen eventually. I have some exciting news to talk about, water news to begin with, to share with you from this week. I want to address a couple of other bills that we also considered, including the failure to pass a budget because of the socialist wing of the Democrat Party that thought the budget that they were proposing didn't spend enough money, and also an extreme proposal from Nancy Pelosi to tax the internet. So let's jump right into all of these issues. First of all, our efforts to fix the water quality issues surrounding Lake Okeechobee need to start at the source, and that means preventing what's called non-point source pollution in our waters in the first place, along with point source pollution as well. But I worked on a piece of legislation, introduced a piece of legislation that my office has literally been working on for several years on non-point source pollution. That's the pollution that comes from sources like agricultural runoff, leaky septic tanks, fertilizer from our lawns, and more, where you don't literally see a pipe dumping that pollution out of the side of a berm or someplace going into our water. Not quite as obvious. So this week, this bill that I introduced, the Local Water Protection Act, along with Congresswoman Craig, we introduced it together, passed the House of Representatives to tackle this issue. Here's why that's important to everybody in our area. Our communities are all too familiar with the social, health, and economic consequences of environmental disaster, dealing with non-point source pollution, which is the main driver of pollution, fueling toxic algal blooms that have created our public health crisis in our area. We're familiar with this. This bill increases the amount of authorized federal funding provided to prevent toxic agricultural runoff from other forms of non-point source pollution. It's going to help fund any number of critical projects, including assisting with septic to sewer conversions. That's important. Dredging legacy pollutants out of areas like Lake Okeechobee or the C-44 canal. Building water reservoirs. Combating the remaining effects of channelization of the Kissimmee River. Those are all things that can be done through the plus up of $200 million into this program annually. That's what that bill is all about. It's absolutely critical that we work together to promote public health, to defend our environment, to protect our waterways. Passing this bill, it's another big step in the right direction, and we still have a long way to go, but this is an important step along that way. Very much enjoyed working on this piece of legislation. It's something that's not just specific for the Treasure Coast. Anybody across the state of Florida or the entire nation can draw upon these resources to go out there and fight for their waterways in their areas. Now, for example, there's no doubt that the federal government needs to do more to match the financial commitment from the state of Florida for Everglades Restoration, right? That's an example. The Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Project, that's known as SERP, right? Passed back in 2000 with the goal of restoring the Everglades. It was envisioned as a 50-50 partnership with the state of Florida. Now, unfortunately, Florida's funding commitment has far outpaced the federal government's in the 2 decades since that plan was approved. The federal government's inability to match Florida's financial commitment, it's led to some pretty big delays to get this SERP plan completed and going, resulting in really what we could call degradation of the Everglades ecosystem and our community's ongoing exposure to toxic algal blooms. So we're fighting for this day in, day out. It's incredibly important that we fund these infrastructure projects like the EAA Southern Storage Reservoir that we authorized towards the end of 2018. If we hope to clean up our waterways, these are things that we have to get done. So that's why earlier this week I testified before the Appropriations Committee about the need to increase funding for these SERP projects to at least $200 million per year. Now, the future of Everglades and our community public health are at stake. This isn't news to anybody in our area. We all know about this. We see it day in, day out. We see it summer after summer. We see it year in, year out. So it's time for the federal government to step up, fund these projects, restore the Everglades. That's what we're working on day in, day out here. Now, on to a few other important updates from this week. First, because they could not agree on a budget, Democrat leadership here in the House of Representatives this week proposed again shirking the House's responsibility to the American people to pass a budget that responsibly uses your dollars. Taxpayer dollars. That's every dollar that we deal with in here in Washington. It's your money. There's no such thing as government dollars, government money. It's all taxpayer dollars. It's all money that you went out and earned, had removed from your check, and was sent into Washington, D.C. Now, of course, the responsible choice here is to pass a budget that reduces spending, balances, because that's exactly what businesses and households do across the country. That's what my household does, each and every week, month, and year. It's what my wife, Brianna, and I work on. But they couldn't agree on a budget, so instead they put forward a bill to raise the spending caps and increase the spending by more than $350 billion over the next 2 years without proposing a way to go out there and pay for it, with annual deficits nearing $1 trillion and our national debt surpassing $22 trillion. This alone is obviously incredibly fiscally irresponsible, and it's irresponsible to you. You think about what went on in the last Congress. Tax cuts to you. You get to keep more of the money in your pocket to go out there and do what you want to do with it. Things that have led to boom in our economy, more jobs out there than there are people looking for work, just incredible growth that we've seen in our economy because you, the American people, get to go out there and do more with your money. Our businesses get to go out there and invest in their infrastructure and their pensions and new lines of building different things. That's what it's all about. This idea of saying the federal government needs to tax more so that they can spend more is the exact wrong approach, but that's what can't be decided on by Democrat leadership, is just how much more they want to spend. They haven't reached a number that's high enough to get all of the Democrats in the House on board with that. So the far left socialist wing of the party wouldn't support it unless they spent even more money, again, without paying for it with your money, because that's the only way that anything in Washington can be paid for, is with your money. So they had to shelve the idea entirely. That is to say, we didn't vote on it on Tuesday when we were supposed to. Now, look, I'm glad that this bill didn't pass, but wow, what a disastrous statement on where we are as a country that we can't agree on a responsible budget that balances. Another proposal this week that we voted on is a plan to have Washington take over regulation of and tax the internet. So, we just spoke a little bit about the fact that, the House Democrat leadership couldn't agree on how much spending was enough. They wanted even more spending. They couldn't agree on necessarily where to pay for it. So we did vote on a bill that would allow the federal government to go out there and tax the internet. Now, like many bills in Washington, the name doesn't accurately describe what the bill actually does. You can name a bill whatever you want it. They named it the Save the Internet Act. But in reality, it should be called Tax the Internet Act, or the Tax the Internet Bill, because this bill gives a panel of 5 unelected Washington, D.C. bureaucrats the power to set prices and dictate how Americans use the internet. So I think we would call that socialism, right? Definition of socialism. Government controlling the means of production. So if the government is controlling the prices and the means by which people can use the internet, that is government controlling the means of production. This is the kind of centralized control and overregulation that has stifled innovation, limited consumer choice for all other sorts of industries under the control of big government advocates in Washington. I think the internet has advanced incredibly well without the government taking control of it. Our access to the internet increases year after year. Our ability to go out there and have higher speed internet, the cost at which we go out there. These are all advancements that we're seeing occur better in our life year after year after year because of the free market nature of the internet. Now, of course, all this regulations that's being proposed wouldn't be free. So if you hate all those taxes and fees that are nearly impossible to understand on your phone bill, on your cable bill, that's what would be happening to your internet bill after a bill like that passed that the House Democrats are proposing. So that's the big difference. If you want to see your internet taxed in the same way that you see your phone and your cable taxed, then you should support that piece of legislation that Democrats put forward this week. And if you don't want to see your internet taxed in that way, then you should be happy that we voted no on that piece of legislation, which is what I voted. I voted no on that piece of legislation. Simply, this bill would recategorize the internet under law so that it can be taxed just like cable, just like phone. Again, I voted no because I want lower internet bills, not higher internet bills. We want to prevent taxing the internet, do not want to impose new taxes. That is the difference of what we voted on today. And it's sad to see that we have to have those votes taking place here in Washington. Now, the good news is that the Senate leadership has already said that they're not going to milk the internet users like Nancy Pelosi wants to do. So even though this bill passed the House of Representatives on an entirely partisan vote, Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other, it won't be making it through the Senate, putting a stop at least to this extreme high tax piece of the Democrats' agenda. So thankfully that's going on for now. Lastly, on a positive side, with tax day coming up next week, we passed a much needed overhaul of the IRS system with one goal in mind: putting you, the taxpayer, first. It does this by improving customer service, easing the process of filing appeals, restricting the IRS use of private debt collectors to harass taxpayers, modernizing the agency's systems to combat identity theft and tax refund fraud. Important legislation. This bill, it's going to change the way that the entire IRS system works. We're finally putting the burden of proof back onto the IRS instead of onto the taxpayer, strengthening taxpayer protections, and most importantly, putting you, the taxpayer, first. Now, for too many people in Washington, they seem to have forgotten that tax refunds are not the government's money. It's your money that the government needs to give back to you because they took too much. You earned it, not the government. For far too long, the bureaucracy in D.C. has made it as hard as possible for you to get your money back. That's exactly what this bill changes, and it's great progress. I'm glad that we're able to get it done, this one in a very bipartisan way. On that note, I hope that you all have a great week ahead. As always, it's an honor to serve you here in Congress, and I wish you all the best.